city of Los Angeles wants to make it mandatory for contractors to disclose whether they've provided any service related to President Trump's border wall. One lawmaker is even pushing for this requirement to apply to the entire state of California. State Senator Ricardo Lara releasing this statement. "I don't want to look back in 10 years and say Californians didn't do everything we could to block this wall," end quote. Here to weigh in is Steve Cortes. He's a former Trump Hispanic Advisory Council member and a Fox News contributor. Steve, nice to see you this morning.
Good morning, Clayton.
Well, first, your response to that LA councilman's comments.
Right. Well, I think it's patently absurd and unfortunately, though, very typical of the left. When they can't win on ideas, when they can't persuade the American electorate, they resort to coercion. So instead of winning in the marketplace of ideas, they're trying to use the marketplace of business to try to force businesses to comply with them. And I think, by the way, ironically, some of the people who would be most hurt if they want to start penalizing contractors would be legal immigrants who have always been deeply involved in the construction industry. So they might be hurting some of the very people they claim to be protecting.
I mean, it seems almost, I mean, it seems like something would happen under a dictatorship. We're going to look into, I mean, this is a legal wall being built, and a contractor.
It's a purity test.
Right. Wants to supply their supplies and labor, and they're going to be vilified for that?
Right. And by the way, I always, when we hear these kinds of things from the left, I like to turn it around and flip the positions. Like, let's say the right tried to do this, because I think it would be equally wrong. Imagine if the state of Texas were to say any contractor who was involved in building a Planned Parenthood clinic can no longer do business with the state of Texas or with the city of Dallas because we're a pro-life state. I think that would be equally absurd. If this is a legal business, contractors are allowed to build it. If it's a legal wall, which the people loudly demanded, by the way, in the 2016 election. I was part of the Trump campaign, and I can tell you that nothing got the response at our rallies and among the Trump base like building the wall did. Because, and by the way, that's not anti-Mexico. It's not because we hate Mexico. We lock our doors at night in our homes, not because we hate those on the outside, but because we love those on the inside, and we want to protect them.
Here's another quote from a Los Angeles City Council member on this whole issue. He says, "We want to know if there are people who do business with the city of Los Angeles who wish to profit from building a wall that would divide us from our nearest and dearest neighbor, Mexico." So basically, would you call this a blacklisting?
I think in many ways it is. Like I mentioned before, it's really kind of a purity test. What I also think is going on there, though, and this is happening in my city of Chicago as well, where Rahm Emanuel is suing the Department of Justice over sanctuary cities. I think both in Los Angeles and Chicago, these are attempts by these city governments that are largely failing their populations, that are crime-ridden, poverty-ridden. These are attempts at a diversion. So the city of Los Angeles, unfortunately, has more people living in poverty than any city in America. In Los Angeles County, 40% of the population is on Medicaid. It's a system that largely is not working. Income inequality is massive, perhaps worse than anywhere else in the country. So I think this is a diversionary tactic. Don't look at our failings here. Look at this target over there. But I think eventually it won't work. The American people demanded a wall. This is clearly a federal issue, not a state or local issue, and the wall's being built.
Unbelievable. I'd love to hear from our viewers this morning on this issue. Friends at foxnews.com. You can weigh in on that. Steve, great to see you this morning. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.